This is day 1 of the August 91 7-day retreat at Springwater. While we were walking, I just remembered I didn't say anything about walking last night in the opening talk. Sometimes people who come here for the first time wonder what this walking is all about, whether it is a ritual we're performing. It may look like that. The mind is ever ready to interpret what is going on in its own terms. There are walking periods so that there's also opportunity for movement after sitting quietly, motionlessly for a while. For the body to move quietly is a marvelous thing. If one has a walking meditation practice which is very slow, then to use some space in the dining room, maybe between the tables, to walk very slowly so that the moving of some 50 people is not held up. We're not racing, but just to have a normal gait, whatever that is. But not to hold everyone up by walking very slowly. For that to find another place. It's quite all right to do that. It's not discouraged. As to interpreting what is going on in the different people who are walking, can one be alert to this interpreting going on? It's often during walking that people get impressions and report about it. Why does everybody look so sad or so unhappy or so zombie-like? Is everybody depressed here except me? One person once asked, why is there not some humor or smiling? It's what it is. And can we abstain from interpreting what is going on in someone else and watch carefully what is going on in oneself? The need to judge separates, doesn't it? We're not saying don't judge or it's bad. It separates, that's a fact. Can that be seen as it happens? Usually on the first day of a talk, or on the first day of a retreat, in the talk we talk about authority, our relationship with each other, about listening. It's so utterly important. And please, if one has heard it before, years ago or many times over, can one listen freshly? That one has heard many times too. But the hearing someone say, can one listen freshly, is different from listening freshly. Without the past inhibiting or judging or tuning out. Because thought says, I've heard that before, it's nothing new, and dreaming in one's own old-fashioned tracks. Can one listen freshly to words one has heard before? Maybe they're not quite the same words, maybe something new occurs to the mind to bring out. But the topic is as old as human beings in relationship. Authority, taking what someone says as the truth or something to be believed in or followed, obeyed, enshrined. Or the opposite of that, fighting it, rebelling against it, putting it down. Can one listen to a talk as one listens to the trees, the wind blowing the branches and leaves? The cawing of the crows, the song of the insects. In that listening there is no authority, is there? It's just what it is. It's taken in, it's received openly, is it? Not as something that shouldn't be or should be. We do listen to sounds like that too. To be aware of that, and can the judgment and the shoulds drop so the mind and body are open, wide open, without screens of likes and dislikes. Wanting to hear something one can agree with, which fits into one's own scheme. Afraid of hearing something that doesn't fit into one's beloved or held on to scheme. Can we talk and listen like that? Not just to a talk here, not just to the sound of birds and insects and trees, but to all the sounds we make. Talking with each other, can we listen openly, wondering, examining, taking it in, not immediately jumping on it, rejecting it, accepting it, wondering about whether what is said is actually so. Maybe one can see it instantly, it is so or it is not so, or one doesn't know. A mind that doesn't know does not reject or accept. It leaves things open to be examined, wondered about, tested. The mind will bring it up. An open question that the mind has asked will come up again. And then maybe one sees oneself talking, moving, acting, reacting in the light of the question, and therefore freshly. Talks are not generally about opinions that I have, beliefs that I hold, although it's all open to challenge whether it is an opinion, whether it is a belief. And these challenges are welcomed. That's what meetings are there for. If one doesn't agree, feels it's just one opinion against another, let's talk about it. Let's look at it freshly. Not insist, but look at it together. Not just think about it. Also look, what do we mean by what we're saying? My intention is not to bring up opinions that I hold, but to look at what is seen to be happening in ourselves and each other, in our relationship with each other. Opinions may be interwoven. So one has to be very alert oneself, not to buy anything, take anything over, but only find out, question whether it is so. See for oneself, which is the capacity of every human being to see for herself, for himself, anew, not based on what I saw yesterday, but freshly, this moment. Does one listen to the words as coming from an authority, someone whom one believes in, someone to whom one attributes reputation or knowledge or experience or insight, and therefore can't quite hear directly what is said and test it for oneself, instantly and as one goes. Is that what's going on? We do want to believe, all of us want to believe in someone, in the truth, in a doctrine. It appears to make things easier and more secure to have something to believe in. It relieves of finding out for oneself, standing alone and looking, which seems to be at one stage or other, seems to be harder, more difficult than to just look, than to just think about it or believe in something. It seems harder to not take over a belief, but rather stay with not knowing and wondering. It is not how we've been brought up. We've been brought up to believe, to take over, to memorize, and to give back what we have remembered. And we get grades, the better, higher grades, the better we remember. The more we retain, the better our grades in school. So there's great value that has been placed on remembering, on accumulating the remembered as knowledge, and having this knowledge available, which is necessary in our practical day-to-day living. But even there, it's very refreshing not to just come from past experience, but to see something anew at work, at home, in relationship. Not just allow the brain to go in its mechanical ways of remembering and acting from memory, from what I know, what has always been the case, and the authority of that, the power of that. What is known, what has always been the way we believe it, has power because it's given power, because that's what we want, to be safe in beliefs and memories and knowledge. It gives a false feeling of security, stability. And what is actually happening this moment in you and me passes by, because the power of knowing what is happening from the past, how you are, how I am, what I am like, what you are like, the power of that knowledge drowns out to seeing what is actually going on. There are two different modes of the body-mind. One is that of knowing, of remembering, of thinking about it, of projecting what one knows onto what is happening now. Having an image of you, how you were yesterday or the whole past 2 months. And now when I see you, this is projected onto you. You may not feel this way anymore. The mood may have changed. The convictions may have dropped or opened up to new input. But if I go by the memory of how you were the last 2 weeks or last 2 months, how can I hear you, see you, feel you freshly? And therefore, aliveness in our relationship, this moment, not based on what happened in the past. That aliveness is there for all of us if there isn't the clinging to the memory of what was, the hurt that was, the pain, the sadness, or the elation or ecstasy that was. The power of that can break in listening now, which is a different mode of the body-mind, a mode not of clinging or rejecting, but of open receiving and intelligent looking and listening now. To what's there to be seen and heard and felt this instant. Here in what I call myself, there in what I call you, and in the trees and air and sunshine and fresh, cool breeze. We're not saying, don't think, don't remember, don't have knowledge. This is all second rate. Can one be aware of what happens when the mind is locked in memory and knowledge and past incidents, images about what happened? Become aware of how locked and inhibited and blocked the energy is, and how freeing the energy of listening now, not repressing what happened, comes up, can be seen. But that's memory. It's not this moment. This moment isn't memory yet at this instant of listening. There's no memory, is there? It's just what is. And that's a different mode of being. Listening and looking to what's there now. Free from what would intrude or block out. And yet aware of that it's there, not fighting it, trying to chop it down, cut it off, be rid of it, overcome it. Just to see it, that's enough. Seeing is a mode as free as the wind. It's not tied to anything, it just airs out what's there. Brings to light. I may be talking too fast at times, so try to make pauses so it's not just like a Niagara rushing over one. Also, the danger of talking with great intensity may be interpreted as propounding. People sometimes say that you sound as though you're propounding something. I'm not trying to propound anything. If there's energy to talk, it's all about energy here. I'm just a spokesperson for everyone, for what's happening. I'm not trying to say this is right and this is wrong and this is good and this is bad. And what is said with intensity means take it over. And the opposite is the bad thing. The brain does all that. It's intriguing to come upon this. How the brain doesn't just listen, but also projects immediately the opposite. The opposite of what is said must be the good way or the bad way. Because this is how it has been trained and conditioned in opposites. It's so ingrained all over this body-mind to think and feel in opposites, and in right and wrong, and to attribute this to what is heard. So the listening has to be very, very subtle and free from attribution, to listen barely to what is said and not attribute right or wrong, or infer that the opposite, if we talk about judgment, then the opposite is I should not judge. Judgment is bad. It doesn't help, does it? One has to see directly the operation of judgment and how it separates me from you, elevates me or lowers me in the mind and the imagination. You're better or I'm better. And therefore we're not together in this matter of judging. We're all together in this. We all judge. This is how the mind has been trained. And the consequences of the training of judgment is, for all of us, separation. Not just for me or for you or for a few people singled out. For all of us, this is also the brain singles out all the time and blames or finds fault in others, in oneself, rather than openly perceiving that we're all doing the same thing. It's the same brain operating in all of us, trained to accept and reject and remember selectively and proceed in opposites. We do find fault so quickly, don't we? We do attribute blame so quickly because we've been raised this way. Blamed from the earliest of ages for being bad, doing wrong, disturbing, upsetting, for being there. One hears the parent says, "Oh, these kids." So to listen without immediately inferring blame is not easy, because the conditioning is there to hear blame, to find fault with oneself or with the one who's talking or with the others that this talk is all about. It's not about me. As such, because of all the blame that has been received and registered, there's tremendous protectiveness developed in this body-mind not to receive any more blame. One has had enough. It's too painful. Body-mind has shut down long ago not to receive any more pain, blame, and the pain of it. But that impairs the whole receiving organism. Can one see that? Shutting down not to be blamed anymore, to protect from further pain of blame, impairs the openness of receiving, doesn't it? For all of us. And the assumption, maybe made long ago by the brain, that enough is enough, shutting down. For a little child already, so many people report this, some vague memory when the shutdown took place. Maybe memories of having died or having been killed. Maybe the capacity to feel the pain, if it comes up now, is there. The assumption that it cannot be borne may be false. It may have been true at an earlier age. But now the defenses make for deadness or half-deadness. The inability to feel the pain makes for numbness and withdrawal and separation, whereas the letting the pain be felt, hearing the blame, not defending, living through the whole thing openly, intelligently, may put an end to an early chapter in one's life. The assumption, I can't be hurt, I can't stand it, I must defend against it, withdraw from it. I'm not saying we talk to ourselves this way. The body does all this. The brain does it automatically. So every new blame or fault that is leveled at one, or that one infers, is an opportunity to listen to it and see what happens freshly. One can feel the defenses coming up, the stiffening, the bracing, the wanting to shut out, shut off, withdraw, and yet there's some listening left. The traffic is still roaring. Insects are still humming. And the pain can be felt if it comes up. Maybe with this listening and welcoming it, it won't even come up. It won't even be what one has always thought it would be or was. Because one says, all right, what is it? Let's feel it. And feeling at the same time how the organism and mind is habitually trying to shut it out. And not going with that habit. Because awareness is there. And wondering what it's all like actually, truly, this instant. The pain of hurt or blame. And the urge to encapsulate and withdraw or fight back. Can there be that wondering about what goes on when someone is cold or critical? Insulting? To really enter into the fire of listening to the whole turmoil that is developing between us or within. What is happening in the other person usually one isn't even aware of or sensitive to. If one was, maybe one would see pain or tightness in the other two who is blaming, criticizing. One wouldn't take all this so very personal, but seeing as a endlessly repeated incident in this, what we call our day-to-day life, repeating endlessly through each one of us, patterns of hundreds and thousands of years ago, patterns of hurt and defense and lashing out and seeking allies for the attack or defense. This is ancient pattern repeating through each one of us, mostly darkly, unawares, with some limited awareness, but not the fullness of it. Which is, let's examine this pattern as it happens once, at least once, completely, from beginning to end. Be there with it, come what may, pain what may, hurt what may. Or does the mind go off on its story in a corner and thinking endlessly about what happened to me and how could he have done this, how could she have done this to me? Gnawing and gnawing and gnawing on that bone. In that there is nothing new, and it is adding to the pattern that repeats through all of us. We're adding to that stream of patterns repeating through all of us by one more such dark, not seeing repetition. Maybe if it happens to one thinks one is so unique in one's suffering or pain or victimization. But in a growing sensitivity to other people all around us and talking with them openly, one finds there's nothing unique in it. We're doing it to each other and have done it to each other for thousands of years, all over the world. So can now, this instant, this moment, something change in this pattern? The change being a light, an awareness, a wondering, a listening, quietly, to all that's happening. The hurt, the stories, the reactions, the chemicals, the organs, muscles tightening, stiffening, aching, pouring out more stuff. And the thoughts that come from that, how I feel. Just let it all come to light. Not say it shouldn't be like this. I should step out of this pattern. There's no one to step out of it. There's only light to be shed on it. This pattern is repeating itself in every one of us. There's no one who's enduring it. That's another pattern of thought. It's my fate. It's happening to me. It's my pain. There's just pain. There's just hurt and reaction. But that it is happening to me is another pattern of thinking. Thousands of years old, millions maybe. Who knows? The quivering and trembling of the leaves isn't happening to the tree, it's just happening. A headache or a sore throat or tiredness or energy isn't happening to me, it's just happening, taking place. And thought says, it's me who hears it, who is suffering from it, who's enduring it, or who should get rid of it. And that thought causes the separation between you and me. It's happening in human beings. Hurt and pain, and joy, pleasure, happening in human beings. But not to anybody. That's thought weaving or constructing something out of happenings. And then the additional pleasure and pain of what's happening to me or what should be happening to me or shouldn't. We're just mentioning it lightly. We'll go into it all week long. At any time anyone wants to bring it up or look at it, we'll do it. We have 10 minutes or 50 minutes. And there can be looking here for oneself, alone, not just during a talk. The talk may stir things up. And then this or that is glimpsed. As a memory of hurt comes up, anger arises, or sadness or resentment, then maybe there's the energy to look at it Not take it for granted, but wonder about it and feel it out in all its intricate responses, physical and mental. So what is said about hurt or patterns repeating is not a dogma or a doctrine or my opinion. We can all test it out for ourselves, whether it's so or not. I'm not becoming something special, or am I becoming something special in the mind, or have already been something special in the mind for saying these things? That affects our relationship. If we can only look together without imagery about each other, then the energy is free to look at what stirs us and inhibits us and blocks us. And in that looking, there can be a freeing of it. But if the energy goes into image making and adoring or fighting or rebelling or following, then it's not there to look and test and shine on what's there. Does that make sense? Obviously, one person is sitting here on this chair, and there's a microphone recording what is said. How this came to be, who knows and who cares? It's happening right now. Someone's talking, but the one who's talking is also listening and looking at what is actually or potentially repeating in all of us, and has been doing so. So what's essential is that there be seeing in us, not following, not worshiping, but seeing and understanding. And in the seeing and understanding, the freedom from the pattern of hurt, of paying back, of withdrawing, of aggressing, which we're not saying are bad things, but they tie the energy. And therefore it's not available for looking freely, openly, joyfully, non-separately from each other. So usually once during the first talk of a retreat, we ask the question, can we, during this retreat at least, work together as friends, sharing in repeated patterns, sharing our concern for it, our interest in it, our looking and listening together, and not make things out of each other which get in the way. If projection takes place, if I project onto you or you project onto me, can we see that in action as it happens and see what it does, what its consequences are? Catch it as it happens, or maybe it's already happened, but the memory is there to look at the memory then. Of the separating power of imagining what we are, rather than being with each other, not knowing what we are, but exploring our common ground. Except for the first day and the last day, the topics for the talks come from questions or comments that people have made in private meetings or in group meetings. I jot down what I remember later when there's some time, and I don't remember it verbatim. Also, it happens that very often many people ask very similar questions at the same time. So what is written down may be a synthesis of different individual questions. So if you hear it brought up at the beginning of a talk, what sounds like the question you had, but it isn't quite like that, don't feel that at the time you were misunderstood or not properly understood. If you do feel this way, do bring it up in the next meeting. Or better yet, if you wish a question to be brought up exactly the way you formulate it, then write it down for me and I can read it at the beginning of a talk. It's a very welcome gesture because it's hard for me to remember and take the time to write down what was. If sometimes people say this, and I'm bringing it up here for everyone to hear, if you bring something up in the private meeting you want under no circumstances to be brought up in a talk, do mention it and it will not come up. And because of having said all this, don't feel that now you have to work up a question to come to meeting with. This is another repeated pattern, comparing with others, thinking, well, if they have questions, I should have them. A competitive spirit maybe pervading the mind. Who's got the best question? You don't have to have a question. Questions often unfold in a meeting. And it's not the good one who has questions and the opposite who doesn't. It's a marvelous thing to sit quietly together and listen to the aliveness all around one and inside one. What are we when there is this open listening, which doesn't focus on anything? It's just open, there, with what is there. Then what are we? Does the brain try to supply the answer, trying to think what we are? At that instant, thinking is going on and it separates from the open listening. So can one also listen openly to a question without the brain immediately going to work trying to find an answer, an intellectual answer? Because there's sort of a scanning mechanism to going through the files of what answer may fit what question, from the past or from what one has read or heard in other talks. It's a real art to listen to an open question and remain open. Wondering openly what we are when there is no scanning for an answer. Really not knowing. we will end here for today.